Welcome back to the Weekly Boost podcast. This week's episode, we have a very special guest. My uncle, he is the president of Idea Marketing Group. As well, we obviously have Ben returning back again, like always, right? You guys will probably see previously, Ben and I were in person. We did a podcast with Matt Donovan on location in Oklahoma. So that was a lot of fun. Check that out. But this week's episode, like I said, a very special guest to me, really close family member. He has a lot of cool stories and a lot of information to share with you about the digital age, the stuff that he likes to do for fun and to stay busy, especially during this pandemic and a lot of the stuff going on in his life. So I guess without further ado, introduce you to Darren Fox, president of Idea Marketing Group. Thank you for coming on.
Hey guys. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be on here. I've been listening to past episodes and everything too, so I think it's really cool that you guys have taken this initiative to start a podcast.
Yeah, we really appreciate that, and we're gonna dig a little shallow first because we saw something that sparked our interest right away, is that you were starting a podcast or in the works of doing something like that. And that's kind of right up our alley, right? We talk about this stuff all the time with podcasts and things that we like to do. So if you're willing to share, if not, we can keep it a sneak peek, definitely. But introduce us to it and maybe give a little synopsis of what's going on with it.
Sure. So a little background first. Obviously I run a marketing agency that I started back in 2009. So looking back, it was a crazy time to start a business. It's when a lot of companies were failing and going out of business. And I decided, hey, now's a good time to kind of go off on my own. So it's been going really well. We've had the honors of being ranked as one of the top agencies in Chicago. And there's another service called clutch.co that has ranked us in like the top global agencies too. So, going from basically a one-man operation to a seven-figure agency has been like an amazing journey. And, I've seen all sorts of things, but we've gotten to a stage with our agency where, we started to kind of plateau out a little bit. And a lot of the things that we were seeing, we were creating a lot of content, but we were spending a lot of time creating that content. And I participate in a mastermind group with agency owners from all over the country. And we meet, like twice a month, and just kind of hearing perspective from them, and all of them encouraging us to do a podcast because that's what they've started to use as their content marketing channel. And it's a great way to just, have a conversation like this, and just hear journeys of what others have done, some of the things that have made them successful. So we kind of took that approach and developed our podcast, which is called Picture This. And we interview beverage brands. That's kind of the niche that we really want to go after more of. So just kind of hearing their stories. And we work with, currently some pretty cool ones too. Like there's a beverage distribution company by us that we're working on right now with their website, and they are the distributors for Anheuser-Busch. So it's pretty cool to be able to go in there and, just kind of hear about some of their stories and, make a lot of those connections. So yeah, I would say that's the first plug is the Picture This. And you're right, we're still in the early stages. We've actually just recorded a couple episodes and we don't even have the final one out yet.
Gotcha.
But that should be posted probably in the coming week or two.
Well, we will for sure add your details to our descriptions and stuff and sort of give a little shout out to that. I know our listeners are relatively in the beverage drinking age, so it should be fun to hear a little bit of perspective from those sorts of avenues of the beverage industry and stuff like that. So kind of going back to what you were talking about, you're the president of a web design company, right? And you started it at a time when the economy and the global economy rather was just completely discombobulated. There was the futures and everything like that were so down, and there was such volatility and uncertainty with everything that you did something pretty remarkable and you started your own business. And kind of going into that, what were some of your fears, I guess, if you can remember? I know it's been over 10 years, right? But what were some of the things that you found right away that were difficult that you needed to overcome in order to succeed?
Oh God, yeah. You don't forget any of that kind of stuff when you start. So it doesn't matter how many years go past. What was crazy too is I was working at another agency and I was the very first full-time hire. So I was basically like number 2 in the company. And then, what's funny is I'm wearing the hat that says idea too. It's actually the logo that I drew, and I drew it 2 years before I even started the company. So I had it for that long. Like I was going to go off on my own. And that was actually my plan, was to go off and do freelance work. Like it wasn't to start an agency. Like that wasn't the goal right out of the gate. So that kind of came after working for a little bit. But yeah, just kind of just going all for it. Like I didn't really have a plan B. It was, this is going to happen or we're screwed. So, we didn't have much of a savings account. So I basically emptied that, and then I maxed out all of our credit cards, just buying software and equipment. And the way that this kind of came about is I was actually interviewing at a company to be in marketing, because one of the problems with the agency that I was working at is I couldn't do web design on the side. So what I wanted to do is work in a marketing position at a company where I could start to do some freelance work on the side and build up my portfolio. So that way, when it was time for me to start getting work, I had something to show. And what happened is, I was in that interview and the guy asked me the question that, all interviews ask you is like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And, I'm a very transparent and blunt person. I said, I'd like to kind of start doing my freelance work more often. And that's when the curveball came, is he's like, what if you did the website for all of our brands right now and we help you start that freelance business?
Oh, okay.
I was kind of taken back because it was an opportunity to work with a large restaurant group in Chicago that had, 12 different restaurant brands. So that was like a huge undertaking. In retrospect, I've kind of gained some wisdom over the years and realized that was a much more affordable move for them to do that instead of bring me on as an employee. But, but it worked out, because the other challenge that I had was a non-compete with the agency that I was at, to where I couldn't even do work within like a 30-mile radius of their location. And I was friends with the owner, so I was going to respect that. I didn't want to do anything to jeopardize that. So Chicago was 31 miles away, and I was able to open up an office there. And, I grew up in the corn. Like, I did not go to Chicago. Like, Chicago was like just this huge, crazy thing where I didn't have any connections. I didn't know anybody. So yeah, that was a risk, just like trying to find work and go out there and like not having any money. Because if you ever go to Chicago, like everything costs money, even just to park somewhere. So
there's no free passes in that city. And we can kind of see that in a lot of the major cities today. It's something that just cost of living and stuff like that. But that's very interesting. You talk about sort of the trials and tribulations that you went through. I remember growing up and hearing about your stories about you trying to go in your own direction with stuff, and like the sort of interactions that you had to have with your boss or from your previous employer, as well as your ventures into finding new work for yourself. Right. And so what Ben and I kind of take away from this podcast is we love hearing that that sort of adversity that you had to overcome. And we don't really get to hear the perspective from a business standpoint. So it's very interesting that you can come on and speak to that. Ben, do you have your uncle does something with bike shops, and we had him on the previous episode or a couple episodes ago. And one of the things that I remember him talking about was the fact that not trying to focus on the past, right? And not focus on the things that going through your life that happened 5 years ago, but rather than working on the present. And so as much of a segue as this sounds like it's going to be, what do you see coming out of web design in the digital market in this next 5 years that people can be excited for? I know that we're constantly involved with our phones and computers and the internet, really. So do you see anything coming from where you're at right now that people can expect to start seeing as the status quo, as the normal, in the terms of the internet?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say a big thing is going to be like facial recognition, especially for advertising. It's
Okay.
things that are already starting to pop up right now, but I can see that carrying over to even a website experience
Oh,
too, to
okay.
where, now everybody has webcams because we have to stay at home and every meeting is done through a webcam. Is like, and that kind of data, I feel like is going to start to be used to influence even experiences that you have online.
Okay.
I mean, they've already started doing things at grocery stores where you could walk past an end cap and they're going to scan your face and they're going to know the things that you're interested in. So that way their point of purchase displays can actually start to target you with products that you shop for.
Wow. That's
kind of scary.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
That's a little, yeah.
Well, because we talked about it, and if you listen, the whole social dilemma and that targeting, do you think that like the internet as a whole, that this was kind of like inevitable that we're going to, and like you said, an experience that's tailored just for you, and whether that's invading privacy or not, or getting targeted ads, do you think that was kind of like I said, inevitable down the road, or was it kind of like just along the way that it just kind of unleashing this beast that you can't really, rein in, I guess?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was coming, and just as you said, it's like a beast that you can't rein in, because when the internet started, there weren't really any rules. Like there's still not a whole lot of rules that are out there. There's like just a lot of gray area that people can operate in. Mm-hmm. And because of that, and just the growth of the internet, there's a lot of things that people haven't been able to do to put controls in place. And now there's products that are being produced that are all smart. Like they are all filled with technology. I mean, people have Amazon Echoes in their house that listen to everything. Yep. And, you're going to have, or you already have this too, where there's refrigerators that are going to tell you when your milk is expiring, because it knows when you take it out of the fridge and when you put it back in, and like just crazy things like that. So yeah, I think it's going to happen. I don't think there's any way to stop that. And, as much as you want to do, like I know especially with all the big, issues with Facebook and Apple and all those things that are happening right now, there's really not any way to avoid it except to completely unplug yourself. But then you're taking yourself away from all the things that you actually use social media for, like connecting with family and loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of stuck. I don't think there's going to be any way to really fix it.
Mm-hmm. And that's great that you mentioned that sort of unplugging aspect. And we're in an age that everything seems to be connected, right? You were just talking about a refrigerator that can predict or actually tell you to the date that when your milk's going to be expired. Like these sorts of things were science fiction novel topics 30 plus years ago that today we live and experience in a daily life. And so one of the biggest struggles that we have as a human race is figuring out ways to unplug and ways to find ourselves without the digital age, even though we rely so heavily on it. And so Ben and I have shared some of the things that we like to do to keep busy or to disconnect or unplug. And so we're wondering, what are some things that you like to do in your free time or whatever that you find yourself most free from technology?
Okay. Yeah. So actually kind of a crazy one like that is like entrepreneurs never unplug. Like we constantly work all day, every day. So really you have to force yourself. Like I love just going out and hiking. Like that's probably one of my biggest things, is just being outdoors. And I took it a step further, and my wife and I love watching the show Survivor, and I joked with her and I was like, I would love to be on that show. So I randomly applied for it. So, cause I'm like, well, that's going to force me to definitely unplug. I can't take a phone with. And, it's just things like that. Is like, I really like trying to challenge myself with opportunities to, grow. And I felt like that was something that, could be really neat to really challenge myself in a way that I never have before.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing something on your social media about that, about applying for it. And I thought that was pretty neat. I didn't even know you could apply for it. So you learned something new, and I also, secretly rooting you on and cheering you on. Hopefully you get it. That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah.
But
Well, and you're also obviously with this podcast that kind of came about
Mhm.
into, you know, craft beers and things like that. And we didn't, when Austin was down here, we didn't really get a chance to, you know, try some. But do you have like a favorite or like a favorite brewing company that's kind of your go-to?
Yeah. Actually, a friend of mine is involved with a brewery that has just kind of started in the area that's becoming really popular. It's called Liquid Love.
Okay.
And they have a lot of craft beers with like flavor profiles that you don't get to really see at other places. And then another Chicago one would be called Mars Brewing, and it's Mars with a Z at the end.
Okay.
And like they just have these awesome beers. Like there's one that's just called like Nasal Cavity, where it's got a little bit of spice to it too. And like just, and the other thing that's really cool that I love about their stuff is their can art. Like all of their stuff is awesome. And you don't even have to see the logo. You can recognize that it's that brand because they've done really good with like their brand to make it recognizable too.
Yeah. And this kind of takes a few steps back in the conversation about, you know, moving before the whole unplug segment. But one of the things that we kind of struggled with early on, and I think Austin went to you a couple times where, you know, making sure that it's your brand, it's your thing. And, you know, it's hard for us to develop that with school full time and work and everything. But like, what were some of the biggest challenges to developing your own brand? Because obviously you start, you know, as part of a company, so you can kind of get, like you said, build your portfolio. But were there any like major challenges to establishing yourself as a brand?
Yeah, definitely. Because when you first start, you don't really have any of that stuff in place. And what's crazy is even us as an agency, we tend to put ourselves at the back burner and we're always doing client work, but we're not really taking the time out to focus on ourselves, which I think is really important to do. So especially over the last few years, we've done a deep dive into our own selves to develop like a brand guide. So that way we have a brand voice. Like there's a special tone when you read our language that's what it sounds like. You know, setting up core values, which sounds kind of crazy, but every business out there should have a set of core values that every single decision that you do with your business, whether it's the podcast or whatever you're doing, follows those values.
That's really nice. Yeah.
Because one of the other big things that we did is, you know, we went through this process called traction. It's called the entrepreneurial operating system. And a lot of businesses go through it. And it's kind of like a training program that teaches you how to run business more efficiently. And that was one of the big things for them too, is like you have these core values that influence even your hiring process. Like you bring up these core values during the interview and you ask those people, do you identify with these values? You know, are you the right cultural fit for this company too? You know, regardless of skill set. So like skill set, I feel like is something that you can teach somebody. But if you don't have these like just core values or like, you know, one of ours is just being authentic. So just like little things like that. And then it helps you. So they call this thing the shiny object syndrome, where it keeps you focused. So that way, if it doesn't match up with all these other things that you do, don't go and pursue it because it's taking you away from your primary goal.
Oh, that's incredible. And I think a lot of people struggling with their brand could probably look to that and sort of find a way to ground themselves and sort of generate something that can be uniform across the entire brand or the entire business or themselves and sort of place them down as their foundation and then build from there. I think that's very powerful because a lot of the struggles I know that I have, Ben and I have with the podcast is making sure that what we want to do with it starts from our core foundation, starts from what we truly believe in and what we want. A lot of these goals and aspirations, they're as lofty as they can seem sometimes, need to revert back to what we truly believe in. And that's powerful to hear that because I'm someone with the experience in your business as well as the experience with family and outside stuff. Like it means a lot to hear that. And so I'm sure our listeners could feel the same way.
Well, and it's nice to know that it's that way across the board, right? Whether it's what the company that I was at for a couple of years, they have their core values, and they brought it up during the phone screen even, right? And even in a smaller podcast like us, it's just making sure that you know what you're about, because the easier or the more you know about yourself, the more you can market yourself. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. And like you said before, you can teach skill set to an extent, right? It's hard to teach those character traits that you want to stick around. So it's nice to see that it's pretty uniform, or at least that's kind of what can make you successful.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So kind of getting back to the unplugging thing, we like to bounce around here. There's no real organizational method. We just say the stuff that comes to our head, right? But you've said that you like to get outside and hike and journey around the local places, as well as going places outside of your radius, right? So for you, what was the place that meant the most to you on that journey, that outside journey that you've gone through? Like, have you traveled anywhere that has meant something more significantly to you than other places, or?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been with my wife since high school. I actually met her. She came to one of my volleyball games. So she was a junior and I was a senior. So we've been together almost 20 years now. Nice. And when we first started dating, we used to go to New Buffalo, Michigan, like pretty often. Like that was kind of our spot that we would go to for like weekend getaways. She had an aunt and uncle that had a house out there, so we would go visit quite a bit. So that was a big personal goal of ours, was to eventually get a place in New Buffalo that we could, go to and just kind of essentially escape the area. So I started working with a business coach probably a couple of years ago, because the other thing that makes you really successful in business is to surround yourself with mentors that are going to help you grow and challenge you to do things differently than what you're used to. I was kind of working with this woman, and, she has you create your personal goals and your professional goals and holds you accountable to say, like, well, what are the steps that you're doing to reach that goal? So once I actually started putting it down on paper and working backwards like a maze of like, well, here's all the steps I would have to take to make that happen, we ended up buying property in New Buffalo probably about a year and a half after that. So it's like, well, holy crap, this is actually achievable.
Yeah.
And you can make it happen. We've done that. That was a big personal project of mine, of like flipping that house and getting it ready, but it's all worked out. And, we love the fact that we can drive for like 2 hours and just all of a sudden feel like we're in a whole different area.
Yeah.
So that's my happy place.
Nice. Yeah.
That's where we like to escape to. And then it's just like a change of scenery with all different restaurants and, parks to visit and all kinds of things. Absolutely. So that's kind of how we unplug.
Nice.
Very nice. The importance of goal writing, I guess, comes out in that. When we're younger, writing down goals and things like that just seems, when we had to do it like in school and things, it just seems tedious. And like 5 years, that's a long ways away, or whatever it is. But, manifesting, even if it's getting a property or doing this or doing that, I think getting it out there, getting into your head, into your subconscious is super important. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, like, holy crap, I can do this, or I can get this property, I can flip this house. Like I can do all these things that I didn't think I could, just by, going through your own head and physically writing it down. But
I mean, it sounds really stupid,
but,
but because otherwise, if you just say it, you're just saying it. Like exactly. There's nothing to really hold you accountable for that with like deadlines or anything like that. So time passes and you're like, well, things are still the same as what they were, because you haven't done anything to take those next steps.
Exactly.
Yeah, we talk a lot about manifesting the change that you want in your life, and whether that change is completely necessary right away or it's a change that you want to make over a long-term goal. I think it is important, like you guys have been saying, that you need to write it down, because speaking something into existence, yes, it can work for some people, right? Like that speaking it into existence manifests it in that real time that in which you speak it. But just like anything that we say, it's almost impossible to remember something word for word, right? When you say something out loud, like if you have to remember somebody's speech, you'll get maybe the first couple words and the last couple words, but the stuff in the middle, you'll never remember it because you don't have it in a physical copy for you to look at. And so exactly right with the writing down. For me, writing down my goals is something that I do to stay on track and focused on those goals, because there's so many aspirations that we make as just humans that want the best for ourselves, that we forget that we've actually made a goal. And writing it down, I think, is a way to not only narrow down the goals that we have, but to really focus on the ones that genuinely make us happy. And I'm sure, and from the pictures that I've seen of your cottage that you've flipped and the land and the places around it, I think it's something that you should be more than proud of. It's something that you should hold really high, because it's the definition of you wrote it down, you wanted that, and you worked your butt off to get there. And so it's a pretty incredible example of that. And Ben and I have similar things going on right now, but I don't think we can say that we've accomplished those goals, which is fine, right?
Yeah.
It's a time process. It takes time.
And keep it in front of you too. Like what's crazy is, everybody has the cell phones, and I use the notes section in my cell phone. I actually have the very first section is just goals. I have professional goals and I have personal goals.
Nice.
So I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing too, is making sure that it's, you're seeing it. So again, just to kind of keep it in the back of your mind of like, all right, I'm working towards that. Like, this is the purpose. Like, God, this was a really shitty day at work, but here's the reason why I'm doing it.
Exactly.
Healthy reminders, right? Like you're sort of marketing for yourself the things that you want to do, so that way you have it in front of you 24/7, and in the good way, right? We talk about having stuff in front of you 24/7, and you relate that to like having your phone in front of your face or having the TV turned on all the time, but having things that promote your well-being and make you genuinely happy, I think those are beyond acceptable things to have in front of you 24/7, 365. So
yeah, and I think all of that kind of encompasses this idea of growth. And you said you start this company, during the Great Recession. Basically, we're bouncing back from that in 2009, and that's a big shift from 2009 to 2020. Now, the internet and how everything has changed. Was there sort of a sustained business growth? Like, this doesn't necessarily have to be like a personal thing, but like sustained business growth, or was it like explosive and very sporadic, where were there moments where you kind of doubt yourself along the way, and then something happens and it just keeps getting bigger, if that makes sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, every entrepreneur has imposter syndrome, and you'll have that throughout the whole life of a business too. I still have it today. Which is crazy to kind of look back on, but no, it definitely was slow at the beginning too. There's nothing that was like explosive. The first year of business, I was making less money than I was, as my first job pushing shopping carts at a retail store, just doing cart collections. So no, like it was crazy. I would, the only thing that was good that I had going for me was I had a dedicated parking spot with the office that they let me use. So I would drive out there in Chicago. Again, I mentioned it's only like 35 miles away. But on a good day with no traffic, it takes about an hour to get there. If there's just a little bit of rain, it takes about 2 hours one way. So it's like almost 4 hours a day of just driving, and it eats your soul.
Yeah.
But like I would drive there, and I had no money to like pay for parking anywhere else. So I would walk to my meetings. So there's times like I was walking through Chicago through areas I found later were not areas that you should be walking through. And just like, walking 3 to 4 miles just to get to a meeting that I had no idea if I was even going to win that business. But, I made such a commitment to get there that I was going to do everything in my power to win that business. So yeah, it was definitely, I would say it was probably about 3 years in before I finally start to see it go in the positive way. And that's when I started to see, well, I can't do this all myself, because, when you do a business, like I was really passionate about design and development, and that's the stuff that I liked. But there's all these other things that come with a business, like the accounting, the sales, just making sure you have insurance, like all these other things that you don't really think about. And then trying to do it, like, people say they start a business for, freedom and flexibility and everything. I was probably working 2 times more than I was working for somebody else. Like, so you work longer and harder, and the rewards sometimes are not there, but you're playing a long game. Like, you're not there for the short wins. You're there for the big goal at the end. So it definitely took a lot of work. I spent many nights throwing up just because, in a panic of like, how are we going to pay our bills? And like, just all that stuff. So yeah, it was definitely not easy. It was very challenging. You have to have a lot of tenacity and grit to start a business and survive.
Yeah. That was kind of one of my questions too, is, we talk about unplugging and being, as an entrepreneur, just immersed in your work constantly. And like you said, you're worried about paying bills, you're worried about getting this account, whatever it may be. Do you ever kind of not regret, but, imagine what it would be like to be able to just set everything aside at 5 o'clock at the end of the day? Like, do you still see this entrepreneur attitude as very fulfilling?
Yeah. It's definitely, there's good days and there's bad days. I've gotten to the point where there's definitely more good days than bad days.
Yeah.
So it's good, but I've got so much into it. It's like, I don't see any other option. Like, this is just going to work. And, it's probably when I finally accepted that, everybody was talking about a work-life balance and trying to find that happy medium, is when I finally realized there is no happy medium. Like, you just have to accept that you're going to have to do these things, and you shouldn't get pissed off about it, because that's what screws up your personal stuff. It's like, or you just block out time and like, just realize this isn't an emergency room. It's not life or death. And it's like, these things can wait a day, and I can push it off. And it's just, it's starting to learn that, because I think as you get more comfortable with that, that's when more of the happiness starts to come into play. It is when you stop focusing on like all of the worry and the negatives and everything, then it's, a lot more successful.
Yeah. Sorry, Austin. Do you want me to go? Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I experienced that too. It just resonated really well with me there, where everything is, because I was kind of put in charge of this lab, basically right out of 9 months out of college, basically. And you get these emails and everything is a fire and you have to go put it out quick and all these things. And it's like, the more that you kind of can filter through those emails and figure out what needs to go first and prioritize. Otherwise, I just had this immense amount of stress, because I think everything is, this big deal. But like you said, as soon as you can kind of realize what needs to be tended to first, you can have more of those better days. And I know my example isn't totally transmittable, but I definitely see similarities there.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm glad that you brought up the idea of how important teamwork has been with you, your employees, as well as your partners in your group, to your success, as well as limiting and eliminating certain stressors that they didn't prevent you from succeeding, but they really took a toll on your business life as well as your personal life too. Like you were mentioning, you were throwing up, night after night every week because of just things eating away at you that you felt obligated to control because it was your business, right? And so I'm happy you brought that up, because we have to drop it in somewhere every episode. But Ben and I, team sport athletes, like we play baseball, right? And we're both pitchers. And so the reliance that we had to have on our teammates in order to help us get that common goal of maybe winning the conference championship or whatnot, it speaks wonders to how it can relate in everyday life as well as business life. not many people, when they think of an entrepreneur or anybody that starts a business, they don't think of a team. They think of an individual. And that's sort of a career path that is highlighted on the idea of individuality, right? You start something by yourself because for numerous reasons, and you build it into something for yourself and for whatever your common goal is. And so it's incredibly interesting, as well as validating, to know that everybody needs somebody. Like, everybody needs to be able to rely on another person. I don't think there is a true sense of individuality in any aspect of entrepreneurship, because clearly you were able to get it done by yourself, right? But you realize that, was it worth the struggle that you were putting yourself through? Was it worth the struggle that the business was going through, or the family, or whatever, if you just allowed somebody else to help? And I'm not saying there was any reluctancy with that or nothing like that. I'm just saying it's incredible to know that in a business field that is completely shrouded in self-decision and self-made prophecy, self-made, fortune, that being a part of a group is almost as important as that, if not more important, because it makes life a whole heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's things that we're all naturally good at, and there's things that we're not good at. And one of the smartest things that you do, and when you even look into history of like all the really successful businesses, is like, they are successful because they hired really smart people. They surround themselves with people that are talented. Like, yeah, you got to get excited about it. And, that's what's been helping me too, is like, I work with some really smart people. And, with that traction process that I brought up earlier, it's kind of cool. They have this thing called delegate and elevate. Is like, everybody fills out this 4-quadrant sheet of like things you want to do and you're really good at, things you can do but you don't really care about, and some of the other quadrants, and everybody kind of fills it out. And then you start to look at it and you're like, well, here's something I'm really good at, but this person is doing it. So it's like, what if we trade, or kind of shift responsibilities, and I take that and you take this? And it's one of the things they always say is like, getting the right people in the right seat. Is sometimes you find out this person's doing a job, but really, if you moved them over to do this thing instead, they're going to do way better at that. And they're going to be happier about it too. So that was something that I started to do too, is like, just make sure that everybody is excited about the things that they're doing, and they're doing it really well. And we did make some changes too, where we took people from certain positions and moved them over to another. And I think that's really important for businesses to do that. And that helps take a load off of, me too, because that old saying, many hands make light work. Like, it's critical that we have each other's backs, because you never know what's happening in somebody's personal life either when they come to work. People don't mean to carry it with them, but sometimes it does. And, to have those teammates or employees or coworkers or whatever, to help kind of take that burden off of you and help you out when you need it, I think that's really important.
Couldn't agree more with that
too.
Well, finishing up with one more thing, kind of just getting back to an overarching thing that we talk about on this podcast, and something that Ben and I are pretty proud of saying that it's part of our brand, right? And we want to hear diverse people's diverse stories. And so we just want to know, what was the most life-changing moment for you, and what did it show that you could do, or what did it show in your life that meant the most to you?
Oof.
You can have more than one. It's okay.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think, probably putting in my notice when I left the other agency to go off on my own. That was something that, that's probably when the vomiting started. It's just having that pit in the stomach of like, oh God, because, I loved all the people that I worked with too. And I felt like I was kind of turning my back on them by doing this as well. But I saw that if I didn't do it, I wasn't going to be in the spot that I wanted to be in. So it was a huge risk to do it. So I think that was definitely like a huge game changer for me.
Nice.
And then, you know, public speaking has always been something that's been really scary too, but I've just like committed to it and I've done it. And I think I've done it pretty well. I've gotten to speak at, you know, a district conference in Illinois and Chicago as like one of the keynote speakers. And, you know, I've done some other things like, you know, kind of like this podcast, but I've gone on an actual like studio and like TV film crew where that was like really intimidating because you're sitting behind a glass wall and you see all these people on computers and, you know, there's mics everywhere and there's cameras everywhere. And like, it's intimidating too. So, I mean, I think just making sure that you challenge yourself and see that, hey, this is going to be an opportunity that I'm going to grow from. You know, worst case scenario, it's a complete shit show. But either way, I'm going to take something out of it. Like just knowing that you're going into it with you're going to grow as a person, I think is another big one. So I'd think challenge myself to a couple of those things that just took me way out of my comfort zone. I think was also like a big opportunity too.
Awesome.
Yeah, that idea of being out of your comfort zone's cliche, but rightfully so, I think, to grow. But
yeah. Well, Ben and I'd like to thank you for coming on. It was great fun talking to you and learning about your story and hearing the things that made you who you are, as well as made your business what it is today. One of the best around, obviously. So again, just thank you. And we will do our best to get the information from Picture This out for you as well. Kind of just a little booster, whatever you want to do.
Appreciate it.
Hopefully in the future, have a little bit of a podcast duo go on, you know, a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of local,
always around to help you guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of local brewing companies around by me too that I've tried, and that'd be a fun topic too. So yeah, it was nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on, and we'll see you next week.
All right, thanks guys.